The big lie has been a phrase that the Democrats use, been a phrase that Trump has used. Now we can rightfully assign it directly to Joe Biden because he lied to all of us. In fact, he said that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, which is very curious, because he's relying on all of these intelligence people, the 50-something so-called ex-CIA, ex-former FBI, whatever they were, very intelligent, and they were going to give us their assessment on what was happening with this laptop story. The problem is, Joe Biden, he could have just gone directly to his son. Okay, Hunter Biden is his son. He could just go to Hunter and say, Dear Hunter, was that your laptop that everybody's talking about? Is that you smoking crack in your bed? Is that you with those hookers? What is going on here? Can you tell me, son, did you drop that off? Yes or no? And so if he didn't have that conversation, or if Hunter lied to him, then we've got questions about that because he said Hunter Biden's the smartest man he's ever known. And it feels like if Hunter was dishonest with him and he knew that he was a drug addict who may have been responsible for stuff exactly like this, maybe Joe Biden should have done a little bit of a deeper dive before he promised us this. Joe Biden in a debate with Trump lying to America, saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story was confirmed disinformation.
50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage.
This is classic Trump. We have 4 days left, and all of a sudden there's a laptop. There's overwhelming evidence that from the intelligence community that the Russians are engaged.
I still think that the stories from the fall about your son Hunter were Russian disinformation at a smear campaign, like you said.
Yes. I know you'd ask it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign. It's the last-ditch effort in this desperate campaign to smear me and my family. The vast majority of the intelligence people have come out and said there's no basis at all.
Okay, but you could have just gone and asked your son. You could have just gone and asked Hunter Biden, was that your laptop? You could have checked his credit card statements, which is probably being routed right into your, portfolio, whatever. So it is an outright lie, right? This would be like a parent. A parent is relying on the CIA, ex-CIA and ex-FBI, rather than providing the information from their own son about any of this. Absolutely insane that they would continue with this big lie, but they did, and it worked. They won. And after they won, it was Jen Psaki who continued to proffer the big lie when she took the press secretary's podium. This is Psaki responding to Ducey, not interested in the laptop story because of, you called it, Russian disinformation.
The president has said, and you have tweeted, that allegations of wrongdoing based on files pulled from Hunter Biden's laptop are Russian disinformation. There is a new book by a Politico reporter that finds some of the files on there are genuine. Is the White House still going with Russian disinformation?
I think it's broadly known and widely known, Peter, that there was a broad range of Russian disinformation back in 2020.
Okay.
Broad range. So that must include all of the official Hunter laptop stuff. All right. And I saw Zulu's in the house. Shout out for the Psaki clip to Zulu. More's coming up, Zulu. We'll get your question about Trump's Constitution comment in a minute. Now, NPR also has this story, posted this October 22nd when this landed. NPR, why haven't you seen any stories about Hunter Biden's laptop? And they said, well, we don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories. And we don't want to waste the listeners and the readers' time with stories that are just pure distractions. Terrence Samuels published that. He's the Office of the Public Editor, October 22nd, 2020. So NPR is just an extension of the government, right? And of course, this story was all true. They didn't think it was true because it hurt Joe Biden and it was very good for Donald Trump. And so they censored and they selectively edited because they are partisan political hacks. NPR should be defunded. I don't even know why they get $1 from the United States. Now, we'll listen to a little bit more from Jen Psaki right after we talk about our friends over at Goldco. If you have an IRA or a 401k or a savings account, you know that things are scary out there. The Biden administration has already printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined. The national debt hit a record $30 trillion. Inflation is the highest we've seen since 1982. It's only a matter of time before the house of cards comes crashing down. If you have retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. Talk to my friends at Goldco. See how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver before it's too late. Go to robertlikesgold.com. They'll give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open up a qualifying account at robertlikesgold.com. They're an A+ rated business with the Better Business Bureau, and they're friends of the program. Check it out at robertlikesgold.com. All right. One of the main criticisms of Matt Taibbi's release was that there was no evidence of government involvement, right? This was between a private entity called the Biden administration and Twitter, another private entity. But when people go digging through the clips, we know that there was a lot more collusion taking place between the government, the FBI, and the big tech companies. In fact, Jen Psaki communicated that to us here.
Thanks, Jen. Can you talk a little bit more about this request for tech companies to be more aggressive in policing misinformation? Has the administration been in touch with any of these companies? And are there any actions that the federal government can take to ensure their cooperation? Because we've seen from the start, there's not a lot of action on some of these platforms.
Sure. Well, first, we are in regular touch with these social media platforms, and those engagements typically happen through members of our senior staff, but also members of our COVID-19 team. Given, as Dr. Murthy conveyed, this is a big issue of misinformation, specifically on the pandemic. In terms of actions, Alex, that we have taken, or we're working to take, I should say, from the federal government, we've increased disinformation research and tracking within the Surgeon General's office. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
We're flagging posts for Facebook that spread misinformation and disinformation. So there was this entire infrastructure that was already set up where the government could liaison with the big tech companies so that they can just censor whatever they want. They just decide, oh, it's misinformation, and now we're in big trouble. And now Jen Psaki admitted it all. So the question becomes, of course, did that stuff happen previously? Has that stuff happened historically? There's a big pattern in place where Jen admits that after Biden won, we definitely know they were communicating with the tech companies. We're going to have to find out if there's anything happening during the government as well. More will be revealed there. But meanwhile, we've got Eric Schmidt. Remember, Eric Schmidt is the attorney general for the great state of Missouri that is doing some amazingly heavy lifting, including deposing Jen Psaki, who we just heard from, and our friend Anthony Fauci, who had a very long deposition last week. Eric Schmidt, AG for Missouri, says, breaking in our deposition of the FBI agent, Elvis Chan, who we talked about previously. He was the liaison from the FBI to the social media companies. Guess what? We found that the FBI plays a big role in working with the social media companies to censor speech. It wasn't just what Jen Psaki was talking about COVID misinformation after the election, after Joe Biden won. No. It's also weekly meetings with social media companies ahead of the 2020 election to ask for account takedowns. FBI agent Elvis Chan, in a deposition with the Missouri Attorney General, admits that they had weekly meetings with social media companies ahead of the 2020 election to ask for account takedowns. Okay, there it is. That's the government involvement. That's the government, as a government actor, actively censoring the social media companies. Chan, according to Eric Schmidt, says, the FBI, FITF, and senior CISA officials had meetings with social media companies in the lead up to the 2020 election, in which Chan personally told social media companies that there could potentially be a Russian hack and leak operation shortly before the election. Oh, weird. It sort of mirrors exactly what we're talking about with Twitter. Those meetings were initially done quarterly, then monthly, then weekly, heading into 2020. Don't you just love it? Chan stated that the FBI regularly sent social media companies lists of URLs and social media accounts that should be taken down because they were disinformation. And they were from, quote, malign foreign influence operations. They just make up crap. That's called actual truth. from the New York Post. The FBI then inquired whether the platforms have taken down the content. Okay, so they get flagged. The government flags it for the tech companies. The tech companies then censor it. Then the FBI says, did you take that down? On many occasions, the platforms took down the accounts flagged by the FBI. There it is. Right there, right? So all of the connection is done now. Eric Schmidt threads the needle. So for all of the Matt Taibbi critics who say there was no government official involved in any of the leaks, you don't need it directly from the Twitter leaks. The FBI just confirmed it under oath in testimony with Eric Schmidt. So that's that. Now, this lawsuit is also being brought by the Attorney General, Jeff Laundrie, out of the great state of Louisiana. He confirms this also. He says, in Tuesday's depo, Elvis Chan revealed the FBI played a big role in working with social media companies to censor speech. Weekly meetings ahead of account takedowns. Chan stated the FBI regularly sent takedown notices, and they did it. Okay, two state attorney generals saying the federal government FBI was telling social media to censor stories during the election. Absolutely disgusting, reprehensible. Government censorship. Now, people have a lot of questions about this, including Josh Hawley. Senator Josh Hawley says that he's got a lot of questions for Biden. The Disinformation Governance Board was supposed to be wrapped up, deleted, no longer available. But as we know, the government doesn't stop when these things are discovered. No. They instead roll them into new programs. They're going to recreate this. They're not going to call it anything as dystopian as the Disinformation Governance Board this time. They're not going to put some psychopath like Nina Janky Jankowicz in charge. No, they're not going to make those mistakes again because they know that America didn't like the sound of any of that. Josh Hawley on what he intends to do to protect free speech in America.
Well, what we know is that these groups, and one major group in particular, was actually sending memos to this disinformation board, apparently advocating for policy, sending it to them. Remember, this board supposedly doesn't even exist yet. And here you have the liberal dark money groups know all about it. They are emailing policy memos to the group, to the disinformation board, and saying, here's what you ought to do. So you have this collusion between the liberal big money interests, between big tech. We know that the disinformation board was setting up a special arrangement with the big tech companies so that they could meet and coordinate their censorship. It's unbelievable stuff, Sean, and this administration has lied about it at every turn.
They've used it. They used it openly to get elected. I don't know if they were communicating with Elvis Chan, but they were using big tech. They were using censorship. They were using the same tools, fighting against misinformation and disinformation in order to save American lives or something? What? They have to stop the New York Post story so that nobody dies and that Trump doesn't win or something like this? Why can't people decide for themselves what that is? Now, Josh Hawley sent a letter over to the departments. Let's see what this one looks like. In a letter to the Department of Homeland Security, Honorable Alejandro Mayorkas, drafted on November 30th, 2022, coming from Senator Josh Hawley. He says, Dear Secretary Alejandro, I write concerning new documents relating to Nina Janky Jankowicz. And she was that singing sort of puppet who liked to sing about misinformation and disinformation. You know, something, disinformation. I'm a lunatic and something. Celebration, right? It was weird. And it was all over the place. But now Josh Hawley has a question about this. And the Disinformation Governance Board, I've got questions. As you know, on June 7th, 2022, Grassley and I expressed alarm over your decision to establish the Disinformation Board within DHS. In that letter, we published documents obtained through a whistleblower that outlined the pervasive scope and the ambitions of the DISINFO board. It's clear, based on the latest documents, that you have finally, he says, turned over that the department has still not told the truth about its continuing efforts to censor political speech. So it's not done, right? The fact that Elon got control of Twitter, it's not over. Like, Facebook is still going to do it. YouTube is still going to do it. We'll see how long this stream lasts. You know, and all of them are still in this big game. They didn't even talk about the Hunter files in most parts of the media until, very reluctantly today. So the government is just going to say, we better gobble up all of that power this time. Now we can't outsource that to Twitter. We'll just bring it inside. And enough Americans have been so indoctrinated by this extremist MAGA rhetoric that maybe they'll buy it. So Hawley continues. He says, on May 4th, in response to my questioning, you testified the board has not yet met. That was untrue. You lied. Documents that your own department recently produced to my office show that the Disinformation Governance Steering Group met as early as February 4th, 2022, and was meeting on a weekly basis. So Alejandro Mayorkas evidently just lied directly to Josh Hawley's face. Hawley says in May 2022, have you guys met yet to talk about your business? Alejandro says, no, definitely haven't met. Turns out they get the documents. Oh yeah, they were meeting weekly. All right. So if you think we have a functional government or ever, can sort of revert to a functional government, I have my doubts. Because they're openly lying to each other. They're not on the same team at all in any way, shape, or form. They are openly at war and lying to each other. Now, shortly after Janke was onboarded, she requested a copy of the last 2 to 3 steering group meeting agendas because she missed them. She wanted to make sure that they weren't spreading disinfo in there. Despite your assertions to the contrary, Alejandro, the board appeared to have operational authorities. Jankowicz indicated that it was the responsibility of the Disinformation Board to ensure that their respective components implement, execute, and follow the board decisions. Our whistleblower documents previously revealed that the board was engaging with Twitter on possible censorship activities. These new records show even more big tech companies were involved. Disinformation Board planned to meet with Meta, somebody named Nathaniel Gleischer, formerly of Facebook, who was the head of security policy over there. He was also at that company when they suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story, and they also had contacts with the Omdiyar Network, a liberal dark money group, which has poured millions into combating misinformation. Okay, right? So it's like political spending under a new label. They can do way more if they call their efforts battling misinformation than it is about converting you to vote Democrat. Okay, it's a very different strategy, but the end game is the same. The documents further show that the Disinformation Board executive director, Nina, repeatedly pushed for the DHS to establish analytic exchange with industry partners, possibly portals, for big tech companies, to coordinate speech suppression with the government. She also pressed for so-called disinformation experts to meet with the board, including one who wrote that conservative consumers are more likely to be susceptible to fake news and misinformation. Those stupid Republicans. They're so dumb. If only they knew that Anthony Fauci was always right, then maybe our country would be in a better place. Another expert that Janke identified has said that has posted about why poor whites chant Trump. Evidently, this is a friend of Janke, and argued that anti-immigrant disinformation is strongly associated with the ideology of exclusion and native supremacy that underpin right-wing popularism and far-right extremism, is a friend of Janke. We now know that when you finally abolish the Disinfo Board, the board's deputy, Elizabeth Cozy, was hired to the White House, where she works as the National Security Council's Resilience and Response Directorate, which sounds like a made-up fake position anyways. A federal court, writes Hawley, and he's finishing up, he says, a federal court recently concluded that an official in your department, Mayorkas, is, quote, supervising the nerve center of federally directed censorship. Footnote 7. What does that mean? Footnote is over to storage, or a court document, actually. Let's take a quick look at that. See if we can pull that up. If I can grab that link. Yeah, here this is. Okay, so this is what Hawley is referencing. This is a memo order that came out in November, and this looks like it is in the case of the big tech collusion lawsuit, and I don't know if we covered this one. Federal defendants filed a motion. Yeah, I think we did actually cover this one. This was the order about whether they will be sitting for depositions. Okay, and so in this, they talked about the nerve center, which is what Hawley is communicating about. All right, so let's pull this document back up. Let's wrap it up. In light of that, I would have hoped that you would be more forthcoming, says Hawley. Instead, you've continued your blatant attempt to avoid transparency and sidestep congressional oversight. The documents you turned over to my office 6 months after I requested them are so heavily redacted that most are illegible. So that Congress can consider remedial legislation, Hawley says, please provide unredacted copies of all documents to Congress so that I can oversee you. As part of my investigation into the DISINFO board, I will be releasing for the public all documents in my possession so Americans can judge for themselves your agency's efforts to censor speech. Yes, that's great news from Josh Hawley. So he's releasing everything that he's got over to America, which will be very good for all of us to see. Signed by Josh Hawley, United States Senator sitting, and we're excited to see what those documents have for us. And of course, we will continue to cover that. Thank you for liking this video wherever it is you're watching it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.